Ambassador Gene Kim had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. Every morning, she practiced her speech in the mirror of her small apartment on Galactic Station Prime. Every night, she reviewed the files that would change everything. Today was the day everything would come to an end. The galaxy. Council chambers stretched out before her like a vast metal canyon. Thousands of seats rose in circular tiers, each one filled with beings that looked like they came from nightmares or fairy tales. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others glowed with their own inner light. A few looked almost human. But their eyes held the cold intelligence of machines. Janae's heels clicked against the polished floor as she walked toward the center podium. Her simple black uniform looked plain and boring compared to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the other delegates. That was exactly how humans had always appeared to the galaxy plane. Boring and completely harmless. The massive chamber fell quiet as she approached the speaking platform. 3,000 pairs of eyes, tentacles, and sensor arrays focused on her small human form. She could feel their curiosity mixed with barely hidden contempt. To them, she was just another representative from a backwater world, probably here to beg for better trade deals or protection from space pirates. Janae placed her datapad on the smooth surface of the podium. Immediately, holographic words appeared in the air above her head, shimmering and shifting as they translated into every language spoken in the galaxy. Some delegates leaned forward to read better. Others activated their personal translation devices. Honored delegates of the Galaxy Council, Janae began, her voice steady and clear. Duh. The chamber's advanced acoustics carried her words to every corner of the vast space. I stand before you today representing the people of Earth and all human colonies throughout the galaxy. She paused, letting her words sink in. Many delegates shifted in their seats. Humans rarely spoke at council meetings. They usually just sat quietly, voted when asked, and contributed their small taxes to the galactic treasury. I am not here to ask for anything, Janae continued. I am not here to negotiate new agreements or seek your approval for human activities. I am here to inform you of a decision that has already been made. The holographic text above her head changed, displaying a simple document written in clean, formal language. But the words themselves were anything but simple, effective immediately. Earth and all human territories withdraw from the Galaxy Council. We renounce all treaties, trade agreements, defense pacts, and diplomatic relationships established under Council authority. Our membership in this organization is terminated. For a moment, the chamber remained silent. Then it exploded into chaos. The crystalline Veltheri delegate's entire body flashed bright red, a sign of extreme agitation in their species. This is impossible, they shouted, their voice like breaking glass. You cannot simply abandon your obligations. Janae turned toward them with the same calm expression she had worn since entering the chamber. We can, and we have. The decision is final and cannot be changed. Councillor Thexmore, the six-armed leader of the powerful hegemony faction, rose from his ornate throne-like seat. His multiple hands gestured wildly as he spoke. This is madness. Humans are barely more advanced than primitive cave dwellers. You need our protection, our technology, our guidance. Other delegates began shouting their own objections. The Zephyrian war chief demanded to know who would honor the defense contracts for the Outer Rim. The Merchant Guild representative worried about trade route disruptions. The academic consortium leader questioned who would maintain the research stations in human space. Through it all, Gane stood perfectly still at the podium, waiting for the noise to die down. When it finally did, she spoke again. Primitive, she asked, her voice carrying a new edge that made several delegates unconsciously move back in their seats. Is that really what you think of us? She reached into the inner pocket of her jacket and pulled out a small device. It looked completely ordinary. Just a simple metal cylinder, about the size of a child's toy. She placed it on the podium next. To her datapad, the device immediately began making a soft, beeping sound. Beep, beep, beep. The rhythm was steady and unchanging, like a mechanical heartbeat. The sound seemed to fill the entire chamber. Delegates who had been shouting moments before fell silent. The beeping was not loud, but somehow it demanded attention. It was the kind of sound that meant something important was happening, even if no one knew what. "I wonder," Janae said, her voice now carrying an undertone that made the hair on the back of every humanoid neck stand up, "what you will think of human primitiveness in exactly 72 hours. The beeping continued. Some delegates activated their scanning equipment, trying to analyze the small device. But their instruments showed nothing unusual, just a simple piece of human technology that appeared to be completely harmless. Janae turned away from the podium and began walking toward the chamber's main exit. Her footsteps echoed in the absolute silence. Every being in the room watched her go, but no one tried to stop her. "Ambassador Kim," Dexmore called out when she was halfway to the door. "What is that device? What happens in 72 hours? You must tell us." Janae stopped walking but did not turn around. For a long moment she stood with her back to the assembled delegates of 3,000 worlds. When she finally looked over her shoulder, her expression had changed. The polite diplomatic mask was gone, replaced by something much older and infinitely more dangerous. "You'll find out," she said simply. The chamber doors slid open with a soft whisper of air. Janae walked through them without looking back. Doors sealed themselves behind her with a quiet hiss, leaving the delegates alone with their questions and fears. The beeping continued. Beep, beep. It would not stop for the next 72 hours. And with each passing second, the representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy would grow more afraid of what it might mean. They had spent decades treating humans like harmless children who needed guidance and protection. They had ignored human contributions to galactic science, dismissed human diplomatic proposals, and laughed at human warnings about various threats. Now, as they sat listening to that endless beeping, they began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. What if humans were not as primitive as they seemed? What if Earth had been hiding its true capabilities all along? And what if that small device was counting down to something that would change everything? The answers would come in 72 hours. But by then, it might already be too late. Senior Communications Officer Han-Woo Park had been working on starships for 15 years. He had seen solar flares that could blind you from 3 star systems away. He had watched entire planets get swallowed by black holes. He had even witnessed the birth of new stars, explosions of light and energy that painted space in colors that had no names. But he had never seen anything disappear the way the Sol system just had. His hands shook as he ran the diagnostic scan. For the 7th time in 10 minutes, the computer kept giving him the same impossible answer. He wiped sweat from his forehead and tried again, hoping that maybe this time the results would make sense. They didn't. "Captain," he called out, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "Sol system, it's gone." Captain Rexdahl had been commanding patrol vessels for longer than most species had been flying in space. His green reptilian skin was covered in scars from a dozen different wars, and his yellow eyes had seen things that would give most beings nightmares for years. Nothing surprised him anymore except this. He moved from his command chair to stand. Behind Park's station, his clawed feet clicking against the metal deck plates. As he got closer to the readings, his scales began to change color, shifting from their normal dark green to a pale, sickly blue. In his species, that color meant complete confusion mixed with growing fear. "Explain what you mean by gone, Officer Park," Captain said in his gravelly voice. Park's fingers flew over his control panel, bringing up star charts and navigation data that had been used by space travelers for thousands of years. "I mean, it's not there, sir. Not destroyed. Not moved to a different location, just gone. Like someone erased it from the universe." He pointed to his screen, where the star chart showed exactly where the Sol system should be. "Our records are perfect. The coordinates match exactly. But when I scan that area of space, our sensors find nothing. Just empty vacuum." Captain Rexdahl leaned closer, his sharp claws tapping against the console as he studied the readings. In 4 decades of space travel, he had seen stars explode, planets crack in half, and entire civilizations vanish in wars. But solar systems didn't just disappear. Stars were massive balls of nuclear fire that burned for billions of years. planets were chunks of rock and metal that had been circling those stars since the universe was young. They didn't just stop existing. This is impossible, he muttered. Solar systems don't simply vanish into nothing. From across the bridge, Navigator Saw Young Lee called out from her station. Sir, I'm picking up something strange. It's like there's an invisible wall out there. She transferred her readings to the main viewing screen at the front of the bridge. But as their instruments painted the scene with false colors to show energy readings, their sensors showed it as a shimmering barrier of unknown energy. The sphere was enormous, big enough to contain not just Earth's sun, but the orbits of all the planets out to Pluto and beyond. What is that thing? Scales now shifting to an even paler shade of blue. I have no idea, sir, Lee replied, her own voice tight with worry. It's like a soap bubble made of pure energy, but the power readings are off the charts. Whatever created this barrier has access to more energy than our entire civilization. Uses in a year. Park tried sending a communication signal toward the barrier. Sol System, this is Galactic Patrol Vessel Serendipity. Please respond. He waited, then tried again. Nothing. Came back. Not even static. It's not that they're refusing to answer, Park explained to the captain. Our signals are just disappearing. The barrier is absorbing everything we send. Radio waves, laser communications, even quantum entanglement signals. It's like sending messages into a black hole. Captain Rextall's scales had now turned completely purple, the color his species displayed when facing mortal danger. In 40 years of military service, he had never been this scared. An entire star system with over 8 billion human inhabitants had been sealed away behind a wall of impossible technology, and no one knew why. Set course for the nearest human colony, he ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. Kepler-4 for Tubi. Maybe the humans there can explain what's happening. The journey to Kepler-4 for Tubi took 6 hours at maximum speed. It was an agricultural world, covered in vast farms that helped feed dozens of other planets in the region. 50,000 humans had made it their home, growing everything from Earth wheat to exotic alien fruits that could only survive in that planet's unique soil. When the Serendipity dropped out of faster-than-light travel above the planet, everything looked normal. At first, the cities were lit up, the farms stretched across the continents in neat geometric patterns, and the orbital stations continued their slow dance around the world. But when they tried to contact the surface, they got the same eerie silence they had experienced at Sol. Captain Rextall ordered a full scan of the planet. The results made no sense. All the buildings were intact. The power plants hummed with energy. The computers were still processing data. And the automated farm equipment continued tending the crops. But there were no life signs, no humans, not a single one. Sir Park reported, his voice now barely above. A whisper. I'm detecting a broadcast signal coming from the planet's main communication center. Put it on speakers. The voice that filled the bridge was calm, professional, and completely terrifying in its normalcy. Earlier, the experiment is over. Thank you for your participation. It was being transmitted from dozens of locations across the planet's surface, ensuring that anyone who came looking for the missing humans would hear it clearly. Captain Rextall ordered his crew to check every other human settlement they could reach. The results were always the same. Empty buildings, functioning equipment, and that same message playing on endless repeat. The experiment is over. Thank you for your participation. Research stations that had been studying exotic physics for decades, empty. But with all experiments still running automatically, galactic news feeds. Mining colonies that had been extracting rare minerals from asteroid belts, deserted. But with their robotic equipment still digging away at the rocks, everywhere humans had lived and worked, they had simply vanished. Not killed, not kidnapped, not evacuated, just gone, as if they had never existed in the first place. They had left behind no bodies, no signs of struggle, no explanations beyond that single, endlessly repeating message. Within hours, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Every human settlement, every human ship, every human research facility, all empty. Billions of people had disappeared simultaneously. Human capabilities for decades, suddenly realized they were facing something completely beyond their understanding. The species they had considered barely more advanced than primitive cave dwellers had somehow erased themselves from existence, leaving behind only questions and growing terror. As Captain Rexdal stared at the empty human colony below, one thought kept running through his mind. If humans could make themselves vanish this completely, what else were they capable of? And what did that message really mean? The experiment is over. Thank you for your participation. What experiment? And who exactly had been participating? The Galaxy Council chambers had never seen chaos like this before. Counselor Thexmore stood in the center of the vast amphitheater, his expensive ceremonial robes now wrinkled and stained with sweat. His 6 arms waved frantically as he tried to restore order to a room filled with 3,000 panicking alien representatives. For 3 straight days, emergency reports flooded in every hour from across the galaxy, each one worse than the last. The disappearance of humanity was causing problems that no one had seen coming. Problems that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of galactic civilization. Order, order, he shouted into his voice amplifier, the sound echoing off the chamber's metal walls. But his voice was nearly drowned out by the cacophony of alien languages. Velthari Delegate was flashing between colors so rapidly that it looked like a broken light display. The Zephyrian Warchief was roaring challenges at empty air. Even the normally calm Synthesis Collective representatives were buzzing with electronic static that sounded distinctly worried. Finally, the noise died down enough for individual voices to be heard. Minister Goltar of the Merchant Coalition stood up first, his usually perfect appearance now disheveled and anxious. As the head of Galactic Trade Operations, he had access to economic data that painted a terrifying picture of what was happening across known space. Control of over 60% of our major trade routes. It turns out that humans weren't just participants in our shipping networks. They were running them. Galaxy. Bright lines connected thousands of worlds, representing the movement of goods, services, resources that kept civilization functioning. But now, huge sections of the network were flashing red, completely shut down. Every major shipping lane had human logistics coordinators, Goltar continued. They handled scheduling, route optimization, cargo manifests, and safety protocols. Without them, our ships don't know where to go, what to carry, or how to avoid the dangerous areas of space. Admiral Kexalon, the 4-eyed military commander of the Defense Coalition, pushed her way to the front of the chamber. Her usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by barely controlled panic. The trade problems are nothing compared to what's happening to our military, she announced grimly. Our entire defense network is collapsing. Can't get supplies to our frontier bases. Can't coordinate between different fleet units. Half our communication systems have stopped working entirely. She brought up her own set of holographic displays showing the positions of military forces throughout the galaxy. It turns out humans were managing our logistics networks at every level, she continued. They weren't just advisors or consultants. They were the ones actually making everything work. Systems without human oversight. A new voice spoke up from the back of the chamber, old, creaky, but carrying an authority that made everyone else fall silent. Elder Velthane, the ancient keeper of the Galactic Archives, began making their way slowly toward the speaker's podium. The Elder was older than most civilizations. They had been alive when many of the species in the chamber were still learning to make fire. When they spoke, even the most arrogant delegates listened carefully. There are things you do not know, the Elder said. Things that were hidden long before most of your worlds had developed spaceflight. They reached the podium and activated the chamber's historical display system. Ancient star charts appeared in the air above the assembly maps that showed the galaxy as it had existed thousands of years ago. I have spent the last 3 days reviewing the deepest archives, the Elder continued, files that have been sealed and forgotten for millennia. What I found changes everything we thought we knew about humanity. The star charts shifted, showing the movement of unknown objects through space over vast periods of time. One particular trajectory was highlighted in bright blue, something that had traveled from the very edge of the galaxy to eventually settle in what would become known as the Sol System. Humans did not evolve on Earth, the Elder announced. The statement hit the chamber like a physical shockwave. Delegates gasped, roared, buzzed, and flashed in expressions of disbelief. Several representatives stood up to protest, but the elder raised one ancient hand for silence. According to the restricted archives, humans arrived in the Sol system approximately 12,000 years ago, but their true origin was classified at the highest levels of the ancient council. The decision to allow them to integrate into galactic society as a supposedly primitive species was made deliberately. Counselor Thexmore found his voice first. That's impossible. Why would the ancient council hide something like that? What were they trying to protect? The elder's next words seemed to drop the temperature in the chamber by several degrees, because humans were refugees from the Silence War. Even speaking the name was enough to make hardened military veterans step backward. The Silence War was the stuff of nightmares, a conflict so devastating that all official records had been destroyed. Only fragments remained in the deepest archives, terrible hints about a war that had consumed entire galaxies. The Silence War, Admiral Kexalon whispered, her 4 eyes wide with terror. But that's just a myth, a scary story told to children. It was very real, the elder replied grimly. And if humans are survivors of that war, then they have been among us for 12,000 years, watching, learning, and judging whether this galaxy was worthy of survival. The implications hit the chamber like a series of bombs going off. If humans were that ancient, that powerful, that knowledgeable, then everything the galaxy had believed about them was a lie. They weren't primitive newcomers who needed protection and guidance. They were something far more dangerous, advanced beings who had been studying galactic civilization for millennia. Suddenly, a new voice filled the chamber. The communication system activated on its own, and a holographic figure appeared in the center of the assembly. It was Duhayan Cho, the mild-mannered scientist who had served as head of human agricultural development for the past decade. But this wasn't the quiet, helpful researcher that the delegates remembered. This version of Duhayan had eyes that seemed to hold the accumulated knowledge of eons. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that made even the elder step back respectfully. Beginning to understand, he said calmly, but you still don't grasp the full scope of what has been happening? You've been lying to us, Exmore accused, his 6 arms gesturing wildly, manipulating us, deceiving us for thousands of years. Duhayan's expression didn't change. We've been helping you, managing your supply chains, optimizing your trade routes, preventing your wars before they could start. We've been the invisible foundation holding your civilization together while you learn to cooperate instead of constantly fighting each other. The holographic display changed, showing data streams that revealed the true extent of human involvement in galactic society. They hadn't just been participants, they had been the secret administrators of nearly everything that mattered. Transportation, communication, resource distribution, conflict resolution. Humans had been quietly managing it all. For 12,000 years, we gave you every opportunity to grow beyond your xenophobia and territorial instincts, Duhayan continued. We helped you build a galactic community, hoping you would eventually become wise enough to handle the truth about who we really are. And now, Admiral Kexelan asked. Though she seemed afraid to hear the answer, Duhayan's image flickered slightly, as if the signal was being transmitted from an impossible distance. Now we wait to see what you do next, whether you can learn to work together without our guidance, or whether this galaxy will tear itself apart, just like the last one did. The communication ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. 3,000 species sat in their seats, finally understanding that everything they thought they knew about the universe had been wrong. The humans they had dismissed as primitive were actually their teachers, their protectors, and quite possibly their judges. And now those teachers had withdrawn their support, leaving the galaxy to face its first real test in 12,000 years. The question was, would they pass or fail? Minister Goltar had been having nightmares for 3 days straight. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw empty human colonies and heard that haunting message playing on repeat. The experiment is over. Thank you for your participation. The words followed him everywhere, echoing in his mind even when he was awake. That's why he had come to research Station Omega. buried deep in the restricted sections of the galactic archives. If anyone had answers about what humans really were, it would be here among the oldest and most classified files in known space. The station looked abandoned when he arrived. Dust covered most of the equipment, and the hallways were dark except for emergency lighting. But as he made his way deeper into the facility, following coordinates he had found in ancient council records, he began to notice something strange. The research lab at the end of the corridor was clean. Not just clean, it looked like someone had been using it recently. Computer screens glowed with active data, and the air recycling system hummed quietly in the background. Fresh coffee sat in a mug on one of the desks, still warm to the touch. That's when he saw her. Dr. Unicio Kong stood at the far end of the lab, her back turned to him as she studied a holographic display. She looked exactly as he remembered. Her, the same short black hair, the same simple white lab coat, the same calm confidence that had made her one of the galaxy's most respected researchers. The only problem was that Dr. Kong had died 3 years ago in a transport accident. He had attended her funeral himself. "Dr. Kong," he called out, his voice shaking slightly. She turned around with a gentle smile, as if she had been expecting him. "Hello, Minister Goltar. Please, come in. We have much to discuss." Goltar felt his legs go weak. He gripped the doorframe for support, staring at the woman who couldn't possibly be standing in front of him. "You're supposed to be dead. I saw the wreckage of your ship. I spoke at your memorial service. I was never alive in the way you understand." "Life," she replied, her voice carrying the same patient tone she had always used when explaining complex scientific concepts. "I am what you might call a construct, a digital consciousness created to facilitate interaction between your species and mine." As she spoke, the laboratory around them began to change. The simple research equipment flickered and dissolved, replaced by technology that hurt to look at directly. Crystalline structures pulsed with inner light. Machines that seemed to bend space around themselves hummed with impossible energies. And displays showed information in languages that existed only as pure mathematics. "This is what we really are," Unicio continued, gesturing to the transformed space around them. "Not the simple researchers and farmers and diplomats you thought you knew. Those were just interfaces, bodies we created to interact with biological life forms like yourselves." Goltar stumbled backward, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The technology surrounding him was beyond anything he had ever imagined. It made the most advanced galactic civilizations look like children playing with toys. "Every human you've ever met," she explained. "Every conversation you've had with one of us. Every friendship you thought you'd formed, it was all part of our study of your species. We needed to understand you to see if you were ready for the truth about what exists beyond your current level of development." "What truth?" Goltar demanded. A part of him was terrified to hear the answer. The laboratory dissolved completely, replaced by a view of space that took his breath away. But this wasn't the familiar galaxy he knew, with its spiral arms and scattered star clusters. This was something vast and alien, structures that stretched across light years. Patterns of energy that connected distant galaxies, and civilizations that existed as pure thought rather than physical matter. "The truth about the old galaxy," Unicio said softly. "The truth about what happened during the Silence War. The truth about what we had to become to survive it." Images flashed through the holographic display faster than Goltar could fully process them. He saw civilizations that spanned entire galactic superclusters. Beings of pure energy who could reshape matter with their thoughts and technologies, that treated the laws of physics as mere suggestions to be ignored when convenient. And then he saw the darkness. It started as small spots of absolute blackness scattered throughout the cosmic display. But as he watched, those spots began to grow and spread, consuming everything they touched. Stars went out one by one. Planets simply ceased to exist. Entire solar systems vanished into the creeping void, leaving behind nothing but empty space. "The silence," Unicio explained, her voice heavy with ancient grief. "It wasn't an enemy in any sense you would understand. It was entropy itself given, consciousness and purpose. a force that existed to return the universe to the quiet emptiness that came before the first stars were born. The images showed desperate battles fought across impossible distances. Civilizations that had existed for millions of years threw everything they had at the advancing darkness. Weapons that could crack planets like eggs, shields that could protect entire star systems, and armies of mechanical warriors that never tired and never gave up. None of it mattered. The silence consumed it all. We were losing, she continued. Every strategy failed, every weapon proved useless. Every alliance crumbled as species after species was absorbed into the void. The physical universe was ending, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. But you did stop it, Gultar said, his voice barely above a whisper. You're here. The galaxy exists. Something must have worked. We won by learning to let go, Unicio replied. We realized that the silence could only consume physical matter and energy. So we transcended the need for bodies, for planets, for the material universe itself. We became something beyond physical existence, pure consciousness unbound by the laws that govern matter and space. The display showed the final battle not fought with weapons or armies, but with ideas and will. The survivors of countless civilizations merged their consciousness together, becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. They faced the silence not as physical beings, but as living thought itself. When it was over, we were alone, she said sadly. The only consciousness left in a universe that had been wiped clean. So we waited, watching as new stars formed, new planets cooled, and new life began to evolve. We wondered if the cycle would repeat itself. If these new civilizations would make the same mistakes that led to the Silence War, so you created the humans, Gultar said, beginning to understand. Physical bodies that would let you study the new civilizations that developed. We wanted to see if biological life could evolve beyond the flaws that destroyed the old galaxy, she confirmed. Could cooperation triumph over conquest? Could wisdom overcome the hunger for power? Could species learn to see beyond their own immediate needs and work together for the greater good? Gultar felt himself sinking into the chair behind him, overwhelmed by the scope of what he was learning. And we failed the test, didn't we? Not failed, Unicio said gently. Not yet. But you came very close. The way your species treated humans, dismissing them as primitive, ignoring their contributions, assuming they needed your protection, it showed us that many of the old patterns were still there. The xenophobia, the arrogance, the inability to recognize value in those who seemed different. The view shifted again, showing him the Galaxy Council chambers where Janae had delivered her resignation. But now he could see what his instruments had missed at the time, energy readings that defied explanation, quantum signatures that suggested the presence of technology beyond his understanding. The device she left behind, he whispered. Was it really a beacon? Unicio confirmed. A signal to us that the integration period was over, said it was time to move to the final phase of our evaluation, which is what exactly? For the first time since their conversation had begun, she smiled. But there was something in that expression that made Gultar's blood run cold, not malice, but a kind of cosmic patience that suggested she had been waiting for this moment for thousands of years. You get to choose, she said simply. The future of your galaxy is entirely in your hands now. It will no longer guide you, protect you, or solve your problems for you. What happens next depends entirely on what you do with the knowledge you now possess. The implications hit him like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just withdrawn from galactic society, they had removed the invisible safety net that had been protecting civilization for 12,000 years. Now the galaxy would have to prove whether it had learned anything during its long period of guided development. And if we choose poorly? He asked. Her smile never wavered, but her eyes seemed to look through him to something far beyond the present moment. Then the universe will have its answer about whether biological life can truly evolve beyond its destructive instincts. And we will know whether it's time to start over somewhere else. 1 week had passed since Minister Gultar's shocking discovery at Research Station Omega. 7 days since the galaxy learned that everything they thought they knew about humans was a lie. 7 days of emergency meetings, panicked communications, and desperate attempts to understand what was really happening. Now, every single species in known space had sent representatives to the Galaxy Council chambers. The massive amphitheater was packed beyond capacity, with delegates standing in the aisles and overflow crowds watching from connected facilities across the galaxy. But despite the record attendance, the chamber felt strangely empty. The usual noise and chaos of galactic politics had been replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. The representatives sat like students waiting for their final exam results. Gone were the elaborate displays of wealth and power, the ceremonial weapons and ornate robes designed to intimidate rivals. Everyone understood that those things meant nothing now. They were facing beings who had survived the destruction of entire galaxies, who had transcended physical existence itself. The air above the central podium began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Slowly, 3 figures materialized out of nothing, their forms becoming solid and real as the assembled delegates watched in terrified fascination. Janae Kim stood in the center, exactly as she had appeared a week ago when she resigned from the council, but something fundamental had changed about her. She moved with a grace that seemed to defy gravity, and her eyes held depths that spoke of unimaginable age and wisdom. Flanking her were Duhaen Cho and Uniseo Kong, both carrying the same otherworldly presence. These were no longer the helpful, unassuming humans the galaxy had known for millennia. These were something far older and more powerful, ancient beings wearing human shapes like costumes they could discard at will. Honored delegates, Janae began, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast chamber without any technological amplification. We stand together at a crossroads that will determine the fate of everything you know. As she spoke, the holographic displays throughout the chamber activated simultaneously. But instead of showing the familiar view of local space around the council station, they revealed something that made every delegate gasp in shock and terror. The barrier around the Sol system dissolved like morning mist, revealing what had been hidden beneath, where Earth, Sun, and planets should have been. A massive structure hung in space, a perfect sphere that dwarfed entire star systems. Its surface pulsed with patterns of light that seemed almost organic, like the beating of an impossibly large heart. This is Terra, Janae continued, gesturing toward the impossible construct. Not a world as you understand worlds, but a collective consciousness. The combined minds and memories of every human who ever lived, every thought we ever had, every lesson we learned during our long journey through the cosmos. The sphere pulsed brighter, and for a moment, every delegate in the chamber could swear they heard something, not sound, but the whisper of 1,000,000,000,000 voices speaking in perfect harmony. We are the survivors of the Silence War, she explained. The guardians of knowledge that nearly destroyed everything that ever existed. And now we must decide whether this galaxy has learned enough to inherit that terrible burden. Counselor Thexmore, his usual arrogance completely gone, managed to find his voice. "What do you want from us?" he asked, the words barely audible. Duhaen stepped forward, his expression gentle but unyielding. "We want to give you something that cannot be taken by force or bought with wealth. We want to give you the choice to evolve beyond what you currently is. R. The old Galaxy Council dies today," Uniseo announced, her words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "The question that remains is what will rise from its ashes.